morning. My name is Ken Ford. I'm Museum Director at Heritage Park. This evening we're going to be talking about a small sailboat that has a lot of significance to the history of Clearwater. Our guests this evening are going to be Clifford K. Jr., Clarkie Mills, and John Bankston. Before we get started with this, though, I'm going to turn to Charlie Jones, the country editor.
Thank you, Ken, and hello to all the people in television land. We're glad to report to you history in the news. The subject is citrus canker. We have heard much about this subject in the last few years. Let us see what was taking place in Florida on citrus canker 70 years ago. Jacksonville, Florida, July the 13th, 1916, with 187 inspectors and workers in the field, or 2.5 times the number employed a year ago. The amount of canker reported to the plant board was 50% less for the entire state than the total reported from Dade County alone during the same month in 1915. This is a substance gratifying report made public after the regular July meeting, the state plant board in the Oregon Hotel yesterday, and according to the members, showed good results in the fight to eradicate this blight from the citrus fruit industry of Florida. The report shows that the board had made a strenuous fight to wipe out the canker, and that the federal government's fight is now just commenced. The plant board met during the afternoon following a conference of the Board of Control, before which several prominent educational workers of the state appeared. Members of the board in attendance were E.L. Wortman of Citra, Florida, Frank E. Jennings, Jacksonville, T.B. King, Arcata, and Secretary J.G. Kellum of Tallahassee. Those appearing before the Board of Control were Dr. Edward Conrady, President of the Florida State College for Women, W.A. Edwards, State Architect, P.H. Rokes, Director of the Experiment Station at Gainesville, and William Newell, Plant Commissioner, who came here to appear before the plant board. So after thinking about this article, it really looks as if history does repeat itself. Several months ago, a state automobile stopped at our home. 2 state workers asked if they could check out the trees for citrus canker. They looked at the trees for several minutes, could not find any canker, thanked me and left. And that's the way it was and still is with canker in our great state of Florida. And now back to our excellent host, Ken Ford.
Thank you, Charlie. That was a very interesting report. And now I want to get back to our first guest this evening, Clifford McKay, Jr. Cliff, how did this small boat come into existence? How did it all get started?
Ken, it began when I got frustrated in building a soapbox derby racer. I went down the hill twice, and that was it. There were no more hills, and Fred got the idea. He said, suppose we take and call it an orange crate derby, use all the principles of the soapbox derby with the merchant sponsoring the boat. The boy builds the boat, but instead of going down the hill twice, he can sail it 365 days out of the year. He went to the Optimist Club in Clearwater, made a speech there. I don't remember the details of it, but through some of their other youth programs, I was at the meeting. And he made a speech, put your hand on the head of a red-headed boy. And he suggested a number of projects, but among them was this orange crate derby with a small sailboat. The Optimist Club was very active at that point, and they took up the idea. They liked it. Dad went and talked with Clarkie Mills, a local boat builder and designer, and they put together this lovely little boat. It was in the fall of, I believe, '47 then that we got the first one completed. You've got a picture of that historic day. Clarkie brought the boat and put it in the water and sailed it a minute to make sure I didn't drown, and then he turned it loose for me to sail.
What does this day bring back to you? What kind of memories?
Well, it was a little cool. The breeze was just right, and I remember the impression of this boat. I looked at it, and it looked sort of square and a bit bulky. And I wondered how it was going to sail, and I was impressed with how lovely it just stepped out. It was light and easy to handle, and just a delight to sail.
So you fell in love with the boat right away?
Oh, yes.
Do you think all the boys did when they...
Well, there were a number of guys that we had been sailing. We'd been hanging around the yacht club. Some of us had been sailing on snipes. And we really took to it. There were a gang of about 8 or 10 of us that started right away in sailing prams.
Who were some of these boys?
Well, Peter DeVoysen was one. I remember Peter and I were locking heads in the first international. I think we had boats from Dunedin and maybe St. Petersburg, the first international regatta. Peter's now a surgeon in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Monty DeArmond was another one. Tink Vernice. Those are the names that come to mind right now.
You stayed in touch with any of them over the years?
Monty, unfortunately, was killed in an airplane crash with the Navy off of a carrier. I haven't had a lot of contact with the others. I've sort of kept touch with them, but not direct contact with them.
Well, one of the things that I heard about was a fire at one time.
A couple of years after the prams got started, they were kept in the old fish house, a tin building right there on the point outside the yacht club basin. And one night, Dad woke me up. He says, "Your boat's on fire." That's all I heard, and we rushed down there, tried to help put out the fire. Of course, it was gone. There was no possibility. Virtually the whole fleet was wiped out, some 25 boats. A couple of nights later, Howard Hartley, a local radio commentator, got on the radio, WTAN, and made an appeal. And of the 20-some-odd boats that were burned, they replaced 42 of them.
So actually the fire turned out in your benefit.
Well, in addition to the boats, they also collected funds and materials to rebuild the shed, and it's now the existing concrete block building there was built by some of those funds that was raised. It turned out to the benefit in terms of number of boats. It also was untold publicity at the community support. It was really exciting.
Well, that's an instance where a disaster turns into something good, which is something that doesn't happen often. But looking back over the years, what did sailing those first prams mean to you as an individual, as a person?
Well, it meant many delightful hours on the water. It was a boat I could launch myself. I could take it out of the shed, put it in the water, go out sailing, and any number of afternoons after school I was out on the bay sailing. I know all the mangrove islands, which is now island estates. Knew them very intimately as I sailed in and around of them, and we were always racing one another. You know, whenever two sailboats together, they're racing.
What was the average number of boats in a race?
Well, in the early days, there were probably 10, 12, somewhere around that, but very quickly it grew. One of the exciting things was going around to the Florida Sailing Association regattas, which they had all up and down the west coast of Florida, Sarasota, Bradenton, Boca Ciega Bay, off Gulfport, Paso Grill, Tampa, and Clearwater, Dunedin. We would take the boats. Ernie Green really pitched in from the Optimist Club and became sort of the daddy of the fleet. Ernie was in the moving business, and he had this monstrous green moving van. Now picture this. The sailors were gathered for the race. They parked in a field that somebody had agreed to let them use. They were putting their trailers down. In this situation, here comes a green moving van. And you open up the back end of it, and they start pulling out these little boats. The sailors didn't know quite what to make of these little ones. My uncle was at one of the races at Paso Grill, and I had trouble with the line that held my sail to the mast, and I sailed along his boat, alongside his boat, in order to fix it and adjust it. And he was putting me down. He says, "Here, you want to borrow my shoestring to tie that back up with?" That was sort of what they thought of it. And then when the moving van pulled up and disgorged 20 or 30 boats, things really got exciting. But they took to it and recognized the value of it as a training boat for other sailing.
So this idea spread very quickly in terms of other communities picking up on pram fleets and starting to build their own boats. And did it go down the west coast of Florida?
It went all up down the west coast. It went over to Miami and up the east coast as well. I've forgotten the exact time frame. It was something like 5 or 6 years, and there were over 1,000 boats in Florida alone.
Well, what about inside the United States?
It didn't spread quite as quickly all over the United States, but once it got a foothold in Florida, it wasn't too long before it became and is now recognized as an international class.
You used the word international right from the beginning. Whose idea was that?
Well, I think this was, you know, it was Optimist International, so that had that capability. But they were thinking big. They were thinking big, and the first major regatta was an international regatta.
And where was that?
Right off Clearwater Point, right there, right there by the drawbridge, off the old pier that was there right beside the drawbridge.
How many boats do you think were in that
There were about 30 boats in that one. I remember particularly that race. It was a 6-race series, which was a little unusual. We finished 5 races, and Peter and I were tied. So whoever beat the other one in the last race was going to win it. And I had a little trouble with my sail. It sounds like I always had trouble with my sail coming untied. That wasn't entirely true, but in that one I did again. I got it tied together. Didn't have quite as much time as I wanted to plan the start, but got off to a good start, and we would just nip and tuck all the way around the course. We came down the last leg, and I goofed. I let him get upwind of me, and he stole my wind, which is perfectly legal in sailing races, of course. And he got that last little puff that I think he beat me by about half a boat length.
Well, I certainly want to thank you for being with us this evening and sharing some of these thoughts about the Pram. And we'll be going to our second guest shortly. Thank you.
Thank you.
Would you like to see what it was like to live in Pinellas County about 100 years ago? I invite you to visit Heritage Park, the county's 21-acre exhibit of homes and buildings from bygone days. From the original log house that sheltered the McMullen family as they raised 11 children in the wilderness to the beautiful winter home of an Illinois industrialist. The Pinellas Historical Museum, located in the park, provides the visitor with an educational experience. The Ralph Reed Room traces the history of the county from the Spanish Indian period up to contemporary times. In the Roy Helms Room, you will find exhibits depicting various themes in county and state history, including a full-size replica of the flying boat used by Tony Janus. Located between Almerton Road and Walsingham Road on 125th Street in Largo, Heritage Park is open from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Tuesday through Saturday, 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. on Sundays. This would be an ideal field trip for people of all ages.
Our second guest this evening is Clarky Mills. And every time I mention anything about a Pram in Clearwater, I think the first name that comes up is Clarky Mills, the man that designed the boat. Clarky, there's an old story that he came up with the design of this boat so that someone could build it out of a 4x8 sheet of plywood and a sheet-off bed. What was the idea behind the boat when you started out?
Well, it's like Cliff Jr. told you, the price had to be kept at $50 or less so that a gentleman and his son could build this boat in his garage or carport. And that was the solution that we got to, was to build the boat smaller till it got to the right price. This was a budget boat from the very start.
Well, it has a blunt bow on it. Does that have any significance?
Yeah, it was made out of the short piece of plywood instead of a long piece, and the price of the boat was pretty different on that account.
So the early boats were made out of plywood entirely?
Yes.
Was there any trim work on them?
Very little.
How long did it take you to come up with the design of this boat?
I can't remember exactly, but it was all inside of a week.
Well, that was a pretty short period of time to come up with a design of a new boat.
It's not too complicated of a boat.
Well, were you in the boat building business at that time?
I was trying to get a little boat shop started up in Dunedin, and that was just something that just fitted my desires. You know, I want to build everything, anything or anything. So when he called me to tell me to come up and told me all about this idea he had, why, that was two of us that was really enthused. And we went right on with it.
How many Prams do you think you built over the years?
Oh, golly, I really couldn't tell you. It must go into the hundreds.
Do you remember that night when the fire burned all of them out?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. there was some weeping and wailing over there. And Mr. Hartley did a job on that. And I think we built most of them that went back. We had a tremendous launching party one weekend there. I remember the city pier was literally covered with brand new Prams.
Well, that was a pretty sight. What do you remember about Cliff McKay Sr.?
Well, he was a professional in the sense that he could talk to a group of people better than anybody I've ever met. And he was persuasive and knowledgeable about what he's talking about. And it didn't take him long to buy those people up with that program. They just bought it lock, block, and barrel. They took it all, and they went right on with it. I can't believe, because later when I joined the club, it seemed like every little thing required tremendous amount of argument. But when he got there, he had that all straightened out in about 2 evenings. So my hat's off to Major McKay. He was just a really great promoter, that's all. And he had the idea all straight goods, you know, and it worked just like he said the whole bit.
What about Ernie Green?
Well, now, Ernie, he jumped on that program, and I believe he worked every minute of the rest of his life that he had a minute to spare. I believe he was working on that Pram program. He did all that, hauling all those kids to all those races, and like Cliff said, they kind of counted him as the father of the Pram fleet. Any little thing of any little trouble at all, they had to run to him. And he had to answer, and he had the parts and pieces, whatever they needed, he had it ready.
So if a boy got
he was just a wonderful man. Yeah, he had a deep love for kids and all their activities that couldn't be matched.
So if a boy got in trouble with his Pram or needed a part for it,
anything broke, he had one spare. He had it all figured out, what to carry on his regattas. He was just a great man, you know. That Ernie was, everybody loved Ernie Green. Well, we're without the both of them now. They've passed on, but they sure left a nice memory in my head, both of them.
what were the advantages to this small boat? Cliff Jr. mentioned some of them, but being the builder of it, what comes to your mind?
Well, of course, it was kind of like I was the mama of it. Not the papa, but the mama. I produced them. And it had a lot of laughs connected with it. You know, it was being promoted by Optimus International. They put it across by pure, all those fellas driving and talking it up. But there are lots of boats I suppose are better, but it fitted the need at the time, price-wise and performance-wise, and I'm proud that it went as far as it did, as well as it did.
What's about the average weight of a boy that would sail in one of these boats?
Well, gee, that's a hard question. You know, some 10-year-olds weigh 150 pounds, and some 12-year-olds don't weigh but 30. So what are you going to say? I don't know.
Okay. Well, I'm sure that each boy, you know, got to a point someplace along the way where he felt like he was too big for the boat.
Well, I think they ruled that they could sail through their 15th year. When it comes to his 15th birthday, they asked them to hand their Pram back.
So that was the age limit then, when you got to be 15.
And there were surely some boys got way too heavy for them before that, but that's the way it was.
Well, Clarkie, it certainly has served its purpose, and we still see him out on Clearwater Bay today, and I want to thank you for being here tonight and telling us about this Pram.
It was a pleasure.
Pinellas County will be 75 years old in 1987, and we'll be celebrating our anniversary all next year with our Diamond Jubilee. There'll be picnics and parades and concerts and boat races, a grand ball, something for everyone, young and old, and especially the huge birthday party that's going to honor all of our businesses and individuals that are 75 years old. We'll be reliving our heritage, learning about the hardships and the victories of our pioneers, the fishermen, soldiers, farmers, builders, people who made Pinellas the vital, exciting place it is today. Right now, we're looking for volunteers. Every kind of support that there is. People to stuff envelopes, hang banners, sponsor events. Get involved now. Call 530-1987 and be a part of saying happy birthday to Pinellas County.
Our third guest this evening is John Bankston. And John got into the Pram business a little late. How did you get into it, John?
My wife and I had been very active, competitive sailors, and when our three daughters grew up to the age that they could fit in a pram, that was the first thing that we did. And when our oldest child was 10, she started sailing and sailed until she was around 18, and then our youngest just stopped a few years ago.
So you had three daughters instead of three boys.
That's right. But I sometimes wanted them to be sons, I think.
Were there a lot of girls in the Pram fleet as the years went by?
Yeah, when we were active in it, I would say that there was probably nearly as many girls involved in it as there were boys, which was really kind of neat because sailing is one of the few activities that girls can get out on the water in these small boats and compete very nicely against the boys.
So it's pretty even at that stage.
Yes.
What are some of the major races you remember, or some of the trips you remember taking with your daughters? You know, this had become an international sport by that time.
That's right. Well, Cliff had mentioned that pram sailing was very active along the west coast of Florida. Well, by the time we had gotten into it, it was active all over the state of Florida and very strong down in the Miami area. Some of the key regattas that I recall taking our kids to took place down in the Miami area at the Miami Yacht Club at Key Biscayne. They used to have a big regatta each year there over Easter vacation. Very popular, usually turn out 150, 200 kids on the water.
Did the girls ever win anything?
Oh, they sure did. Yeah, my oldest one was probably the most competitive one, and she won a regatta at the Fort Lauderdale Yacht Club when I guess she was sailing in the Blue Fleet at that time. Against some very good boy sailors, I might add.
Okay, I bet you were proud of that.
Oh, you betcha.
Another question that came up, do some of these young men and these young ladies go on and get into competitive sailing on a bigger scale?
Yes. One sailor comes to mind, Royce Rarick, who we're kind of proud of. He started right here at the Clearwater Pram Fleet and grew up in prams, and last year was fortunate enough to win the United States Yacht Racing Union Youth Sailing Championship. It's called the Smythe Trophy, and that's competing against sailors from all over the United States.
How big is that boat?
That he was sailing in?
Yes.
I believe that Royce was sailing a J-24 then with two other boys.
So there is a little step there on up into the bigger world of racing from the Pram fleet.
Yes. When my wife and I were involved in the Pram, we noticed that as the kids grew up and they got a little heavier, their competitive edge kind of diminished. So a group of us thought we could move them into a larger boat, which we elected to be the Laser, which is about a 13.5-foot boat, to take care of the heavier child and the older one.
Looking back on it now, we look at the Pram and it looks kind of boxy, but what are the sailing qualities of the Pram?
Oh, the Pram's a wonderful little boat. It's just right for a kid. I think it's without a doubt the finest boat that was ever designed or built to teach a child to sail in. There are many youth sailing boats on the market, but none quite like the Pram, where you can put a kid in it all by himself with his life jacket on and send him out on the water, and he's the captain of his own ship. There's got to be no other feeling like that in the world.
What are the major parts of the boat, looking at the boat itself?
Well, like all sailboats, it has a mast. It's a daggerboard boat. That's the part there in the middle, which makes it easy for a couple of kids to beach the boat and pull it up without doing any damage to the boat. It's a sprit-rigged boat, which perhaps is not the best sail rig in the world for going to weather or going upwind in the boat. But it makes for a very stable, stiff boat, not easily prone to capsizing.
What's the weight of one of these boats?
The class minimum weight is 70 pounds. There are a set of tightly administered rules that describe the boat, and that happens to be one of them. Theoretically, the lighter the boat, the more competitive the boat is, so they have limited it to 70 pounds, which is also a nice weight for a child to be able to handle.
Sure, they can get it up on the beach or store it or put it away or get it out themselves. What about the change of material?
Well, we've seen a lot of that over the years. First it was the wooden boat, and later they switched over to fiberglass, but wood still seems to be the material of choice for a competitive Pram. Now there's another boat that is an outgrowth of the Clearwater Optimist Pram, and that is the International Dinghy, which there's a little story involved in that. One of the world's great sailors, Paul Elvström from Denmark, came to Miami in the late 50s to sail in a Flying Dutchman World Championship there, and he saw these boats sailing there and took the design home with him to Europe and made a few minor changes in the boat, and out of that came the International Optimist Dinghy, which I understand to be one of the most popular classes in the world in terms of numbers of boats. Sailed all over the world in practically every country of the world.
Before we get any further, I've got a picture here of some gentlemen. I'm sure that the audience will recognize the man to my right.
They should. This is Clark Mills at a little earlier time, and this is Clifford McKay Sr., and this is Irving Green.
Ernie Green.
Ernie Green, sorry. This is a little bit before my time.
Okay. Well, we want to thank you for being here. It's been interesting talking about this Pram this evening. If you had just a few short words for some young man or lady, what would you say? Would you tell them to get into it?
Oh, I sure would. I think sailing is one of the greatest experiences any of us can participate in, and this is a great way to get started in it.
Thank you, John, for being here tonight.
WWBA proudly presents